Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Hello, Josh, my friend. Now we do have another update on the Metal Gear Solid remake. The remake that won't die, you might say. Remakes never change. Now this comes from David Hayter himself, but saying he was over on the Dan Allen Gaming podcast, talking to Dan Allen himself, and was being asked about remakes, in amongst a conversation about Kiefer Sutherland, Metal Gear Solid, Hideo Kojima, and everything else. And he was literally asked, what would happen with the remake? Do you think it's going to be going ahead? And he says that, actually, a couple of days ago, I received a text from one of his insider friends saying that it was actually going to go ahead. Hayter's pretty frank, saying that he's not involved yet, and they sort of talk about how it would be done. Would he approach it with more of a over-the-shoulder third-person camera if it was going to be done from the ground up, etc. But they talk about the viability of him returning for the voice role because the original PlayStation 1 recordings wouldn't hold up. He says that the audio from Twin Snakes could be used, but even then, you'd probably rather want to have a newer recording altogether just because technology has advanced so much. And so that's kind of just, there's a little bit more to this in terms of when the leak has been covered in the past. We've covered it last November. What's your thoughts on Big Hayter himself diving in with all the thoughts?
Yeah, unexpected. I mean, I'm pleased to see him just so frank about it. I love that he was just like, I had a text from an insider who said it's probably happening. I was like, that's cool, David Hayter. I thought you would know a bit more concrete info than that, but it does sort of, like you say, indicate that he's not directly involved, or at least he's not revealing that he's directly involved at the moment. Yeah, which makes me wonder about what kind of remake we could be getting. Is it just going to be a sort of bells and whistles kind of remaster of how the game plays in its current state, or is it going to be a full-on Resi 2 style, ground-up remake where they would have to bring him in and record new lines, all that jazz?
Well, the thing is, we covered this last November from the Moore's Law is Dead podcast. There was an insider on there who predicted before it was officially announced God of War 2 Ragnarok being in existence, and so they also said that the Metal Gear Solid remake is going forward, that it's being developed by Bluepoint, and as of last November, it was in development for 3 years. So it's a pretty sizable project if all of that stuff is true, and a lot of people, like in that person's case, hinging their reputation on that leak being true. But you'd assume that David Hayter would have been contacted at that point. So it's weird. Like, maybe they are going to use the audio from Twin Snakes. I doubt they would use. There's some weird algorithmic upgrade available for the original PlayStation audio. But for me, the PlayStation audio is they're way better takes on that dialogue than Twin Snakes. I don't know if you have any preference, but like for me, Twin Snakes is just not the way to go at all.
Yeah. Well, for me, the original recordings have just like such a special place in my heart. I do think they just about edge it out as well. But I wonder whether they haven't contacted Hayter to re-record any lines or do it again. I wonder whether that's because MGS, more than any other franchise, Scott, is just so loved for its its story, its characters, and the voice acting performances. Everyone was up in arms when David Hayter wasn't returning for MGS 5. So I wonder whether
David Hayter.
Yeah, it's such a difficult thing to thread the needle for remakes in general. You want to update things, but you don't want to piss off the fans by needlessly changing things. And I wonder whether like those original voice recordings are so sacred and so ingrained in our minds that they wouldn't want to do them again because you'd notice that something was maybe off. You'd maybe notice that some people had gotten older, maybe slightly lost how they delivered it in the first place, or tried to add something new. And because so much of that game is the script, so much of that game is the performances, is the cutscenes, is the dialogue, is the codec. It's a big chunk of it. And if you kind of like get that a little bit off while re-recording, you might lose a lot of fans immediately off the bat.
There's also the massive disparity between the way that Metal Gear Solid's PS1's cutscenes are directed versus the way that Twin Snakes is done, where Twin Snakes is way more crazy anime, Solid Snake's like a superhero, literally surfing a missile when he's fighting the Hind D. It's just, I always hated that stuff. I know that Kojima isn't a massive fan of the way that Metal Gear Solid 1 was translated because it wasn't him that had hands-on. He wasn't the dude that translated it. He wasn't in those conversations and everything. Hence why everything after MGS1 is just way more ridiculous. But at the same time, he wouldn't be involved in this whatsoever. So I kind of wonder what a side team even does with this. But at the same time, if this has been in development, the conversations have been going on for the last 3+ years, then maybe that slightly overlaps with him having some input. Do you think he would I've left some liner notes behind of okay, do it this way, or make it more like Twin Snakes, or leave out all the changes that were brought in by the dude that translated the original?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, especially if it's someone like Bluepoint or associated with Sony is doing it, I can't imagine they wouldn't have reached out, especially because Kojima has an independent studio at the moment, and I'm sure he would perhaps want some input on it, even if it is just kind of like a George Lucas style consultant, where he gives some notes and they might use them, they might not, it's up to them. I can't imagine he'll have like a proper hands-on role coming back to direct it or anything. I imagine he's completely happy to be retired from Metal Gear in its entirety at the moment. But yeah, I think they would contact them. Just how, that's happened on remakes and even some remasters in the past where you go back to the original creatives, get their input on how they modernize certain things, and then go from there. If it is Blue Point, if that rumor from last year still holds up, I think, it's in safe hands. The Demon's Souls remake, remaster was like incredible. I thought even though they made some changes, it seemed like they managed to please the fans. Even if things were a little bit different, it retained the spirit of what made the original so resonant back in 2009 or whenever that first came out. So I feel like they're a good studio, and they do have history with the MGS franchise in general, because they did the HD remasters for 2, 3, and then Peace Walker as well. If I am correct, I'm starting to doubt that now.
I think so.
I think I'm right, but yeah.
No, I think they did do the initial upgrades for it, which is why they were in the last few years when we've covered this stuff. It's always been like they would make sense because they've got hands-on with this material before. There is that whole thing though around the way that Blue Point approached remakes, which was very much a visual overhaul. Because they talk about in the Dan Allen interview about like the way that Metal Gear Solid plays. You've kind of got this sort of isometric, quasi top-down camera for quite a lot of it, and the way to sort of modernize it would be throwing the camera over his shoulder and make it a bit more, Resident Evil 4 style. But for me, once you start changing that, I mean, I don't know about you if you played Metal Gear 3 Subsistence when they brought that camera in, but like that just didn't feel like the right way to play. Like there's even that joke in Metal Gear 4 where it's like when you put the camera above him and there's like a Solid Snake says something like, "Oh, that's the right way to play," or something like that.
Right.
And it's like if they change things like that, to me, you're changing the identity of Metal Gear Solid, and there's also the playability side of it in terms of seeing enemy vision cones and stuff like that. So, do you have any preference on how you would approach it in that regard?
I mean, personally, I would like them to keep the perspective, but I think realistically, if they're doing a proper remake, they won't. They didn't for Resi 2. I was the same for that. Like, even though I love Resi 2, that turned out so well. A part of me's like, I would love that to have an option to toggle to the tank controls, toggle to the fixed cameras, and play it like it was, the original.
Like the original Metal Gear Solid in Phantom Pain's engine, maybe that.
So, I think that's what they will do. I just, like you said, that will fundamentally change so much. That will fundamentally change how the game plays, how the levels need to be designed, how the boss battles work and stuff. And that could be cool, especially if they've been working on it for 3 years and they're doing all of this work and they're completely changing it. But like you said, I think that will change the identity of it. And I hope they retain some of the eccentricities of that original game, because going back to it last year or maybe the year before, or whatever, I was taken aback about how survival horror-esque some of the sequences are. And I think you might lose some of that if you have too much control, or if you can see too far ahead, or you change the color palette or something. But at the same time, I think they have creative license to perhaps do what they want. I would just also like to see the original Metal Gear Solid 1 be playable in some form on modern consoles as well, because otherwise this remake does threaten to replace it. Whereas if you had like the regular game ported over and then also this reimagined version on top, I think that would be the best of both worlds.
Well, the original Metal Gear Solid is still like my absolute favorite game of all time. I still think that it holds up brilliantly. Like, I mean, you can point to things like camera angles, maybe needing to be changed because the industry's changed over the years, but I would still give anyone a copy of Metal Gear Solid and say, play this. And I still think that the vast majority of it completely holds up, totally works, all the story stuff lands and everything else. So I think for me, it's just an access point thing. Like, just put that game on newer systems, and if you need to up-res the visuals, then fine. And if you need to touch up the audio, it's fine. But like, hopefully don't get too far away from the specific, affectations, the specific ways that those lines were delivered, because, those are the things that are written in history. They're written in stone. Like, that's why Twin Snakes, for a lot of people, including me, was just like, this feels wrong. This feels like you've changed it too much. So yeah, let us know what you think down in the comments below. What would you do for a Metal Gear Solid remake? And how would you want it to play? Do you want it to be more like Metal Gear Solid 5, or would you keep something more like the original version back in the day? For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
And we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.